Yep, that's me, walking out of prison for the first time in 17 years, and you can see it all over my face. I've been through hell. 2003, I was sentenced to 144 years in prison by the Commonwealth of Virginia, and to be honest with you, I'm not supposed to be free. I wasn't supposed to even be given the opportunity to tell this story. And before I get started, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, stay free. 35 to 54 years in prison is what my attorney said he could get me as a 19-year-old kid that was the driver in a robbery where no one was even physically touched. Couldn't do it. I remember instantly going into panic in my mind, again, wishing that my mom, anybody could help me, crying out to God. I didn't know what to do in that moment. But I did muster up enough courage to tell my public defender, I can't do that. And what's scary is there's a lot of kids that age in courtrooms, some today, that are being railroaded by their public defenders, prosecutors, etc. And they're not brave enough to say anything, or they just don't know that they can. They don't know their rights, etc. And I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, I got to tell them something. And he said, if I tell them the wrong thing, they can end up giving you more. But if I'm doing 35 to 54 years, what's more? If I'm doing 35 to 54 years, what's more? So I took literally like 10 seconds, man. And in that span, I had to figure out how much of my life I'd be willing to sacrifice or give up to the courts, to the judge, to the Commonwealth attorney, to the prosecutor, to make them happy, and how much time I think that I could survive in prison so I could get home to my family, to my freedom, a second chance. And I just told them, I just want to be home before I'm 40. I knew dudes was getting life sentences. I had multiple robberies. I said, just tell them I want to be home before I'm 40. I'm sorry. He said, you sure? I said, yeah. He went out there. About a minute later, the bailiff or whatever, the guard comes to get me, walk me out in the courtroom. He didn't come back. My attorney never came back to tell me everything was going to be okay. He didn't look over to tell me he was going to be okay. But in hindsight, I got to remember there was no plea offer because I didn't cooperate. And when you're in front of the judge, you're in front of the judge. So basically, the conversation he was having with the prosecutor was basically just to get him to agree not to say he wasn't good with that request for the time that I would be requesting as on my sentence. Because the prosecutor would get nasty and say, nah, we offered him 35 to 54. He's asking for 20 or less than. No, we want him to have life sentence now. They can get nasty. I remember when I was in the courtroom looking at everybody and I couldn't see their faces. Everybody was a blur except for my mom. My mom was like the only ray of light in that place. My mom is not a street person. She doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, barely cusses. And now she's in a courtroom trying to fight for her son's life. And they would ask her to get on the stand and speak about my character. And she was brave. And then they gave me an opportunity to speak about my character. The fact I was in the military, the fact that this was the first time I got in trouble. I didn't have to speak about the case because the rest of the guys they had been sentenced. So what was known was known. And I just told them because they had already, snitched and testified on me that I was the driver. I just said I never left the vehicle. And I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't understand how deep this was. I didn't know because nobody was going to get hurt. Nobody did physically. So he explained mental and emotional trauma. It's the first time I started hearing that. By this time, I'm next to my public defender again. And finally, he says, well, Mr. Willers, I hereby, I'm going to grant your wish. And I remember feeling relieved and saying to myself, I got a second chance. But immediately after I heard him say, you got 144 years, and I kind of zoned out because I was like, I thought he said I had a second chance. My public defender, he snaps me back in. He tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "It's okay." He said, "He's suspending everything but 19." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "That means you got to do 19 years, but you're 19, so you can make it home." He said, "You'll do 85% of that, which is a little bit less than that." And I was like, "All right." You know what I'm saying? I was like, here we go. And in some way, I was relieved. I now knew what I had to face. But this also meant that I was about to be on my way to prison. And it was going to be a long ride, 17 years. And I knew nothing about it. And now, here we go. So I was sentenced at this point to 144 years, all suspended but 19 years. I would have to do 85% of that in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It was now time to go to prison, or go down the road, as they say. At the time of sentencing, I immediately, after going back into my dorm that night, or my pod that night, I got into a fight the next morning and literally kicked off what they said was a riot, but it was really just me flipping a milk cart and throwing some trays because I was mad that the guys had got our visits canceled the night before. And I told them, if y'all come out in the morning and eat breakfast, I'm going to raise, because I wanted to see my mom. And it wasn't the right thing to do. I don't glorify that. Again, this was the 19-year-old version of me, and I raised hell, and we're gonna talk about it. I was angry, and on top of that, it was on site for me. Anybody that I felt like just had an issue or felt a way towards me, I didn't care. I had to have you. Win, lose, or draw, it is what it was. I just had something in me I had to let out. And I didn't feel, even though I was grateful for a second chance, my young mind couldn't fathom doing 17 years. Like, it was one thing, but I got a second chance. But once the shock of court wore off, nah, it felt like I would never be able to see home again. Like I was going to die in here. I got eventually put on 2-man escort in the hole, which means that I couldn't go anywhere without 2 officers escort me, and I had to be shackled at my wrist to waist and ankles as well at all times, even to go to the shower or stand in a cage outside to get some fresh air. I was in the hole permanently until my number got called to go down the road. When you go down the road, the first place you go to in VA is receiving. Receiving is basically where they assess you. And that was okay, but it was not prison. You're there for 2 weeks. You're separated from the rest of the compound, and they level you out. They send you whatever level you're going. Level 1 is the lowest, level 5 being the highest. Or level 6 at the time, I think. Red Onion may have been still a 6. Now the highest level's a 5. I ended up getting sent to a level 4 because of the amount of fights I had got into. I had started a clique while I was at the jail called the Collar Crew, with some youngins that were from out of state. The charge, just everything. I had everything stacked against me, and they sent me straight to a maximum security prison called Sussex 2 State Prison. First thing I remember, aside from those horrible bus rides and feeling claustrophobic and hoping the bus driver didn't crash because you're shackled in there and locked inside the back of a van or bus. But in this case, it was a bus. I remember pulling up to Sussex 2, and to this day, it's etched in my mind. It was a fortress. It's unforgiving. It's cold. It's concrete. It's steel. It's not a place you want to be, and you recognize that immediately. Barbed wire everywhere. Getting off, they were yelling. They led me into a room, and they literally told me to strip. And while holding a camcorder on me, they would say things and ask questions. What's your name? Your date of birth? Hey, can you squat and cough? Over and over, different questions. I believe it was part of a humiliating process, but I don't know, meant to break you down. And ironically enough, they stopped doing that in the DOC, at least in VA. Once that was over, they take you to the barbershop. They shave all your head, hair, facial hair, all that. You're not allowed at the time to have any of that. You go to laundry, you're issued your garments, and it's usually used whites, used boxers, used shirts, used socks, used everything, clothing that other people have wore, but they wash and then they reissue once the individual's either lost their life, moved, etc. The clothing is recycled. once we were issued our stuff, we were let out on the boulevard, and it was summertime, and it was like 100 degrees or whatever, and everybody was outside. And instantaneously, though I was blinded by the sun, I looked out and I seen a sea of burgundy, because they didn't have prison blues at the time there. Everybody had burgundy smocks. And I also seen violence, chaos, and confusion. I seen that this was my home, and this felt like some Road Warrior, Mad Max stuff in here. I seen guys fighting. I seen stains on the boulevard that I learned later on was blood. It was just a lot, man. Dudes arguing. The tension was there. They're on the fence because you got to walk down this boulevard. They on both sides. Yo, where you from? Da, da, da. You don't know if you got an enemy there. You know, it's bad. This was all before I even got into the building that I was going to be living in. You understand what I'm saying? This was the morning. The morning. The first 24 hours was crazy. The whole situation, my entire living in prison was crazy, but I immediately, I got broken ASAP. It's like, hey, welcome to prison. We gonna max you up. We gonna send you to the worst of the worst. Might well get used to it. And that's what happened. And let me tell you something, the first 24 hours, it was crazy. So I'm in prison now. I am at Sussex 2, aka Saigon, aka the war zone, aka where 70% plus those that are housed on that institution will never see freedom again, unless an act of God or a law change, because there's not parole in VA to this day. When I walked into the building, the first thing I can remember is the smell. It was cold. It was institutional. It was oddly familiar and reflecting a school almost, or a barracks, maybe better. And guard said, "You're upstairs. You're going to D pod. When you get to D pod, stop at the office right away. Guard will be in there." I walked up the stairs, and before I could get all the way up the stairs, there was a group, about 4 or 5 guys, just chilling in the stairwell, literally with their pokers out, waiting for dudes to come back from commissary. Luckily, I had not been to commissary. They seen that I was a new guy coming up from laundry, and they said, "Go ahead, brother, you good." I was shook. I seen all of these things, including a bunch of dudes in the stairwell getting to rob people coming back from commissary, because I heard them talking about it before I even got to my cell. And this is where I'm going to live for the next 17 years. I kept going. I made it into the dorm or the pod. The officer came to the slider to meet me. And this guy was no harm and disrespect. His intelligence level was, he had to have been somebody they needed bodies for the job, so they just put him there. When I asked him what cell he's like, "Well, you're in cell such and such." I was like, "Do I have a cell partner? I'm by myself." He's like, "I think you got a cell partner. Let me see." He didn't even know what was going on in there. So how can you keep us safe, which is your job, and you don't even know who's who, what's what? You don't know who's supposed to be in this cell, who's not. You don't know. Right? So he walks me down and says, "Oh yeah, Omar O's in this cell with you. You're good." I had, as I'm walking to the cell with him, I was looking out in the block, and it's nothing but cement, a few metal tables with metal benches, a TV mounted up on the wall above, 6 phones on the wall, water fountain, hot water spigot, and a booth where a guard standing with a shot with rubber bullets. Ready to just, hey, get you. There's a red line in front of all the cells that I would later learn is basically, it's a no-go zone, that once you come out your cell, you have to stop there after the count time, etc. And then the only time you're able to move is once the guard says you can go, or you will get hit with a rubber bullet. Immediately, I kind of stuck my head and I looked. I said, "Whoever lives in here," in my mind, it's like, it looked like a little apartment. It blew my mind at first. I was like, because the guy had the floors waxed. He had pictures up. The music was playing. Chessboard was out. There was a lot of books. And immediately he came over, the guy that was supposed to be my cell partner. By then the guard had walked off. It was literally me for myself. He was like, here you go. And that was it. He didn't tell me when we were eating, how to talk to a counselor, nothing. It was just, here you go. I'm in prison. I'm in a level 4. I got to say this again. I'm in a level 4. People are looking at me crazy. I'm young. You understand what I'm saying? I used to have hair. I'm young. You know, everybody in there, everybody's not nice. Everybody's not a stand-up guy. You got predators and all that in prison just like anywhere else. I remember before I came down the road, the old heads used to tell me, hey, don't talk to anybody that talks to you. Sit back, observe the scene before you get active. Don't take anything that's offered. They gave me certain rules, and I already knew, like, that's how I was moving. They also told me if anybody tries to, disrespect you, you got to handle that. Because if not, then it's going to be a long road for you. I was on point. My cell partner came over. He's like, what's up, man? I was like, nothing, man. I just came here from the jail. He was like, hey, man, it's all good. I'm your cell partner. Like I said, his name was O. He was a pretty good dude, man. He had been down already for 20-some years, life sentence, and knew he wasn't going home. And I was grateful that I got put in a cell with an OG. He wasn't on no funny tight time, none of that. He was just super clean. He had his OCD ways that he picked up from being in prison forever. But in my mind, he was the OG. I'm coming in. I'm just trying to learn. And he told me, he was like, don't worry, I'm going to tell you what's what, how to move, blah, blah. Immediately, the first thing he did when we went in the cell, he reached up underneath the lip of the toilet and he gave me a blade. And he said, you're going to need this. He said, it's not nice in here. He said, I'm not talking about the cell. You're good here, but the dorm, the pod, it's not nice. He said, I keep a toothbrush in the door because this time it was count time, lockdown. He said, I keep a toothbrush in the door in case the guard opens the door when we sleeping because guys will run in here and they'll try to get us and take whatever's in here. He said, and there's mirrors in the corner of the cell in case you sleep with your back turned. You can look at the mirror if the door opens, see if somebody's coming in at you. This is what he told me immediately. Again, never been to prison. He began to talk to me about how to get a job and certain things, and that definitely helped. I was able to end up getting a job in the kitchen, and I'll get to that because that was a whole nother experience. He gave me information on just how to get to the counselor. Like, he was my orientation. What the counselor should have been doing, he was doing. Shout out to rest in peace, matter of fact. But he gave me that prison 101. I would sit back and observe, like when they popped that cell for the first time, that was my opportunity to go back into the dorm. And he was like, yo, just chill, fall back, just see what's what. I'll tell you if somebody's good people or not. But again, I can't trust him 100%. I don't know him like that. But this is the best thing I got right now. The only possible ally I have. I'm not from VA. I don't know anybody that's up here. I sat on my box against the wall in front of the cell, chilling, looking out in the dorm. And sure enough, a couple dudes came up trying to offer me tobacco, whatever it is. I turned it down immediately. And I found out later on these guys was predators. Nobody came up to me doing a paperwork check where I was at. Nobody really even checked to see if I was affiliated. Every state is different. Every system's different. And when I got locked up, gangbang and stuff like that wasn't as big of an issue until about 2006. This was 2003. And then they called chow. When we went to chow, I was toward like the middle of the line. The whole pod has to walk together to the chow house down the stairs. And I remember before we can give it to chow, guys are stepping over something. And I look to see what I'm about to step over. And it's a body. It's somebody that, this dude Marty had his whole jaw twisted and some other things had happened to him. And guys didn't say anything, they just walked right over him. And I did just that because he told me, said, see but don't see, hear but don't hear. Went to chow. And that's where it got. We went from the dorm with somebody pointing to going to chow and somebody pointing to join at you while you eating the whole time. And it was just a traumatizing experience. And while we were in chow, they ended up locking the institution down because of who we had walked over in the stairwell. So the whole prison's on lockdown now. Within 24 hours, I seen the aftermath of somebody that had been viciously assaulted, and I'm now experiencing my first lockdown. At least I had a decent cell partner, OG, that put me on, schooled me, let me know what was going on. By the time we got off lock, he had showed me how to fill out applications, request certain things, and I ended up getting a job pretty quick in the kitchen. What's good about getting a job in the kitchen if you're incarcerated is you get your paycheck, you can steal food to hustle, which is an additional stream of revenue, and you can eat for free, which saves money, saves on commissary. So for me, I always wanted to get in the kitchen once the OGs told me what it was at the jail that had already been down the road. I needed to make the moves that I needed to make quick so I could get things that I need, like a sweatsuit to chill in so I didn't have to wear the prison smock all the time, or TV so I could watch the news and be out of people's way. So I was grateful for that. When I was in the kitchen, man, I met this old white dude named Kentucky too, man. And Kentucky, he showed me how to, you know what I'm saying, hustle wine, make wine, hustle hooch or whatever. And I was lit. You know what I'm saying? I had a way to provide for me and mine. You know what I'm saying? I had a way, and when I say me and mine, my cell partner, like I could hustle, you know what I'm saying, make sure he was straight. He had some commissary in the box because I would keep the wine in the cell while it was being cooked. And we was good. You know what I'm saying? I started to learn more about bidding or just doing time. Started to get into a little bit of a routine. I was able to identify more and more, you know, people that I definitely didn't want to associate myself with. I met people like Big Shirley, he's a serial, fill in the rest. That's just chilling, watching ESPN, and says, "Hey, what's up, man?" You don't even know you're talking to a psychopath, by the way. And yeah, I'm just getting familiar with Sussex too. I'm thinking about right now as I'm talking about. I'm thinking about certain individuals that had reputations for bad stuff. Some stand-up guys I met there, which brings me to Brother Anthony, because we were just talking about the kitchen, and this is all in the same timeline. Brother Anthony was the first brother I met in the kitchen. He trained me. He taught me how to work in the dish room, and I was actually going to be his replacement. He's getting ready to go home. I didn't know him for like super long, but he was one of those individuals I was just great. Like we just clicked up. Like he was just good dude, man. He had already been down for about 12 years, but he wasn't, you know, too far removed from the streets, if that makes sense. Like he'd still get visits, be on the phone, all that. Brother Anthony was a happy soul, man. I'm not gonna say that people don't have their own demons or whatever, but he was a happy soul that used to like to uplift people and, you know, just see people motivated, etc. And when we were in the dish room, the last memory I have of him, we were in a dish room and we were rapping back and forth. We was rapping Chronic 2001, that song Explosive, and just vibing. And at the end of our shift, it was the last shift. He was getting ready to get moved down to 4 building. I was in 1 building, but 4 buildings were at the time they were moving everybody that was getting ready to go home. And I dapped him up and I said, "Man, I'm so happy for you, bro. I'm glad you made it home, man. I can't wait till, you know, my time comes up." Mind you, I still had 16 years plus left on my sentence. So he was like, "Man, I'm gonna hit you up once I get out there. Blah, blah. Don't worry about it." Boom. So, you know, a couple days go by, nothing out normal, blue, whatever. I'm on the rec yard. He had told me to come out, you know what I'm saying? It was Saturday, you know what I'm saying? And I remember saying to bro, or sending word back across the yard, like, "Man, tell him to stay in the pod, man. He tripping, like, what you doing?" You know what I'm saying? And he had sent word, he's like, "Nah, he was trying to see certain brothers before he left." And we go out on the yard, and the way the yard is on Sussex too, each pod is in a separate cage, basically, or a separate yard, isolated, because you're really kept separate from anybody that's outside of your dorm for the most part at the time there. And let me tell you something: when you're down short on your sentence, when you're about to go home, you should not go out. into the yard. You shouldn't do any extra. You should be in your dorm or check in or nothing. Especially on a camp like that, because everybody does not want to see you go home. You understand what I'm saying? So, Brother Anthony, he said forget that. He must have wanted to go in the yard that day really, really bad and say bye to everybody. And while we're on the yard, he was, talking to different people through the gate, as they say, and shouting people out. Next thing you know, he's like, hold on real quick. I'll be right back. Mind you, I'm in one fenced-in yard, then it's a boulevard, and there's another fenced-in yard that he's on. So we can't physically get to one another. Two of his homeboys are on the yard with me as well, and we're all on the fence just talking to each other, until he says, hold on. And we see him walk down the yard, and we see him arguing with somebody. And my homeboy is like, yo, what's up? Brother Anthony had people on the yard with him that he was cool with. But next thing we know, Brother Anthony was getting jumped and beat pretty badly. And not one of his people that was on that yard with him, they didn't say stop, they didn't yell, they didn't try to grab somebody, and so they didn't do nothing. And Brother Anthony was 2 days away from going home. It was Saturday. I got to say it again. He was about to go home, and it was Saturday. I don't know if you ever seen somebody get knocked out on their feet, but that's what happened to Brother Anthony. He was conscious but unconscious, and he was following around the individual, one of the individuals, and the individual turned around and said, stop following me. But Brother Anthony kept saying, man, why'd y'all jump me? Why'd y'all jump me? And, he's out of it. Anybody could have just stopped him, said, it's okay, you got it. But they didn't. The guy told Brother Anthony stop following him. He said it maybe once or twice more. This is, of course, what we're hearing from guys that are on the yard, because we couldn't hear it. We're just seeing the transaction between everybody. And the guy got fed up with Brother Anthony following him. He turned around. He hit him twice with a piece of fence in his chest. Brother Anthony took a knee, leaned against the fence. We started to scream. Hey, bro, you good? You all right? Straight? No answer. One of the brothers went down as he was running down there to get one of the guards to see he was all right. He didn't care. He didn't care if he was going to be looked at as a snake. He wanted to make sure Brother Anthony was good. Nobody in the yard was really trying to help him, which I understand. You're in the dorm with these guys. You're not trying to be involved, blah, blah. By the time he was on his way down to go get a guard, the guard was coming up the boulevard yelling Brother Anthony's name for a visit. He couldn't find him on the yard. He was looking for Brother Anthony. Brother Anthony. And finally, the guard looks down, and we're like, yo, check the fence. The guard walks down, he taps the fence. Brother Anthony falls over. Boom. When Brother Anthony falls over, his whole face is purple. It's over with.